Well, hello, this is Adam, and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars. It's one of the last weekends, unfortunately, in the fall here. You can see most of the leaves are off the trees, really before the snow starts to fly. So we don't have much more time for road tests and car tests, but I'm going to try to cram it in there. And for those of you who are frequent viewers of the channel, you know that I recently procured this 74 Marquis in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, actually in Park Ridge, Illinois. It was on Facebook Marketplace. People ask me, how do I find my cars? Facebook Marketplace. I was in Chicago for work. I just thought, well, I'll troll Facebook Marketplace and see what I find, and boom, this pops up. And I thought, I better go look at it. And I was enticed by the fact that, number one, it was a 74 Marquis, and I know that these are really rare. They only made 2,600 of these base coupes in 1974. They made some more Marquis Brougham coupes, but the 74 is really the rarest of that 71 to 78 generation. And it was black, and it had a black interior, which is super, super, super rare for these cars. And it had 17,000 miles on it. So I saw those things all combined. I thought, I got to go look at this car. You know, it was 45 minutes-ish from where I was. And there it was, tucked in the back of an auto repair shop, last tagged in December of 1986. Had been sitting there for a long, long time. And I looked at it, and the car was in really good shape, and I had to buy it in spite of all of the other Marquis that I have and Marquis Broughams. This is, as I said, a base Marquis, 2600 made, 82 in black, 12 with black exterior, black interior, according to the Marty report. So again, hyper rare, just 12, that's it. And I actually like the base Marquis better because it doesn't have that fender peak molding on it that runs the length of the car. I think this is a cleaner look. It just has a menacing look. This is one of those cars you can tell has that Ford design of the era. This drag section at the lower rocker. It has very angular sides and surfacing. If this were a GM car, you'd have a nice lead-in, or the fender would kind of rise gently, as it does on the Mark IV, but the Mark IV is an anomaly in the Ford styling stable of the era. It's very just blocky, angular, masculine, in your face. I think it looks great. It's not a beautiful car by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a handsome car. So again, had to buy it, really rare, black car, low miles, great condition. I think the thing that really had this thing parked in the shop for so long was that the driver's window was stuck down. And this is one of those Armstrong cars, i.e. crank window cars. And what tends to happen is there's a plastic guide that goes back and forth in the regulator as the window raises and lowers. And that guide breaks, and then the window falls down into the door. And it looked like somebody had tried to take the door panel off and didn't know what to do because the regulator was all intact. It really was just missing that plastic piece. So if you want to see how to repair one of these, check out Tony Lawler's YouTube channel, Tony's Car Care. And you can see how he repaired this very car. He came from Vandalia, Illinois to my home and repaired it, and now it's just fine. We greased up the tracks and everything, operates perfectly. So now I don't have to drive with the window down and be freezing cold as the cold weather here hits. So again, 74 Marquis. People ask me why I like these so much, and they just have such a quality about them and a ride that's sublime. You know, Chrysler vehicles of the era tend to ride pretty stiff. The AMCs do as well. The GMs are a bit in between the Chryslers and AMCs and these wallowy Fords. But the wallowiness, if you're just looking for a cruising car, it is so sublime. You go over bumps, you don't feel anything at all. You don't hear anything. The engines are silent and quiet. You just hear a gentle whirring noise under hood. I mean, it really doesn't get better than this. And despite the fact that this is a 74, it still has really good torque and pickup. This one came, as is the case with some of these that I buy, somebody installed a Holley carburetor on it, and I leave it. To be honest, the Motorcraft 4300s are not very good carburetors. And even when the cars come with the stock carburetor, which this one didn't, it was lost to time, I tend to leave the Holleys or Edelbrocks on there because the cars run better. This car actually runs really well, and it's pretty peppy for what it is. So great driving car. And the other great thing is you don't pay that much for these cars, relatively speaking. If you wanted a 74 Impala or a Caprice, or especially if you wanted a 71, 2, or 3, you're going to pay big dollars now for one of those. And if you want an LTD, those are cheaper than the GM offerings. But the Mercury is kind of this forgotten car, and they really are a super niche collectible. And I think they look great, they drive great, and you can get them for good prices. Let's take the camera off the tripod and walk around the car and describe a little bit more about it now. Okay, so we're going to walk around the car and describe a little bit about it. First is this front end. This is the first year of the 5-mile-an-hour bumper standards in the front and the rear. So this car does have the big railroad tie bumpers. I actually don't mind it on this car. The front is so in your face that I think the bumper kind of goes along with the theme of the car. Certainly not a dainty looking front end. And this is a 1-year only front end for the Mercurys, where they were really trying to copy Lincoln. They have this block lettering, just like on the Continentals. They had block lettering, the big vertical grille. 74, they got rid of the grille spilling over into the headlights that they did on the 73s, and the 73 had an egg crate theme. The grille was also metal on the 73s, and it went, unfortunately, back to plastic in 74. I did make one modification to this car since I bought it, and that is I put on a set of near NOS turbine vane wheel covers. These were optional wheel covers in 1974. I think they look great with the red centers, particularly on a black car, especially with the red trunk lock emblem, which I'll show you in a second. And the standard wheel covers just didn't quite do it for me. They're a little plain Jane. But that's really the only modification I made. You can see here, as I said, this car was last on the road in 1986. Here's a sticker from Park Ridge, Illinois in perfect condition from 1986, 1987 that I've just left there. I think it's kind of a neat period piece. And if you go out back, you see the 1-year only rear end treatment on these cars. They changed the rear end in 74 from 73. 75 would also be different. And they have the Lincoln theme going on here again with the 3 tail lights, just like the Lincoln had. Even the trunk lock cover on this car is perfect, which is super rare. Usually these are faded. The red portion doesn't look nearly as good. The tail panel looks great. The paint shines. In spite of, I would say, this is one of the worst paint jobs that I've seen on a Ford of the era. Usually the quality of the paint jobs is pretty good from Ford during this time, but this one's lousy, and it's a factory job. There's some different runs in the paint in different places, but there's no overspray, and sometimes these cars, that's just how the paint is. You'll see some modeling, you'll see some imperfections in it. They weren't always thrown together with the greatest of care, although I would say the Fords were thrown together with greater care than the GMs and the Chryslers of the time. Just a handsome car overall. Let's take a look inside. Pretty low option car. It just has the AM radio, air conditioning, appearance protection group, the body side molding, and a few other things. But boy, is it ever clean. I've steam cleaned this interior. No armrest on the base Marquis, just like the Delta 88s for GM. Chrysler liked to put the armrests on the base cars. It does have armrests in the rear, which would go away in subsequent years. And it does have windows that operate in the rear, which would also go away, I believe, in 75 on the Marquis. So if we get inside, you can see the dash is just in perfect shape. No cracks. All the gauges are still like new. I obviously don't have the air conditioning on. It's cold here today. But it does work even. It's a little cool. It needs some charge on R12, but it is cool. The heat didn't work, and often on these what happens is the heater control valve sticks. That's an easy fix that I can show you under hood in a second. But I mean, look at the door panels. They're just about perfect. Seats are perfect. Headliner, perfect. It's hard to pass up on a car like this. And this one was around $10,000. little bit over that. But again, 17,500 miles. Drives great. Let's take a look at the trunk. These have the Ford super deep well trunk in them. Let's see if I can operate this trunk lock cover with one hand and put the key in. So there you are. It's got various pieces. It came from the previous owner in a car cover. I haven't quite looked to see what's in here yet. No idea. That'll be a fun little escapade. There is a second steering column in here, I believe. Yeah. The owner wanted to put a tilt column in it, but never got around to it. This just has a fixed column. I think the fixed column is fine. But big trunk. Closes really nicely. Vinyl top is perfect. This is the first year for the seatbelt interlock and these big seat belts for the Fords, which are a little clunky, but they work fine. Again, you can see the driver's door panel. All the carpet and everything is just in really nice shape. Got to vacuum it again. I've been driving it a little bit. And the great thing about these Marquis, as opposed to LTD, is under hood you get the 460 engine as standard. So let's take a look under hood here. And I have not detailed this. As I said, this car was heavily undercoated. It's got undercoating spray all over here, which is not what I'd prefer, but what are you going to do? They made 12 of these cars in all black, and it preserved it. There's no rust. You can always get like a dry ice cleaning procedure or something. So if you have no heat in your Ford, that's the heater core up there. What often happens is this is the heater valve that blocks coolant going into the heater core when you have the air conditioning on recirculation. This little plunger gets stuck. You can just move it and then check to see if you have coolant flow through the heater. That was the case on this car. So easy fix. Now I've got heat. I did rebuild the carburetor. The car still has the original Sipcon wires on it, as you can see. Again, it was just sitting for so many years in the back of a shop, but it runs very silently. So here we go. I'll start it up. It's cold, so the fast idle will be on. And it starts up without putting my foot on the gas. Just like that. Perfectly smooth. Oh yeah, gotta love the sound of a big block in the morning. Just a single exhaust on these, not a dual exhaust from the factory. So let's close it up. You can hear the wonderful Ford door closure. Try that with a GM. Let's take it for a ride. All right, so here we are in the Marquis, driving down the road. God, these cars drive great. I mean, you can hear, or you can't hear. It's just absolutely silent in here. And it's a windy day. But this car just is so quiet, so smooth. It's even not that horrible of a handler. I wouldn't call it a great handler. These are quite interesting cars because compared to the General Motors vehicles, you don't have much glass area. The roof to the top of the dash is not that great of a distance. It might be a little over a foot, and that's about it. GM had much more glass area. These coupes on the Fords of the era are pretty squinty and gunslit. Oh, this one isn't as bad as the Mark IV as an example. That is kind of like a modern Camaro is on the inside. But just effortless cruising. I mean, I could drive this car forever in comfort. Feels great with the heater on here. These heaters in these old cars are so nice and toasty warm. It's just not the same in the new ones. This just directs the heat right onto your feet. You kind of get this feeling of radiant heat from underhood, probably because the engine is so inefficient it's rejecting a lot of heat. But again, just a wonderful, wonderful driving car here. Lots of space, lots of comfort. This one, the steering gear is still pretty tight too. You could tighten these up on the Fords. There's an adjustable nut. But being a low mileage car, this one doesn't need to be adjusted. All the bushings in the suspension are still soft, so as I go over bumps, you hear no impact harshness. Of all the cars that I owned, I would say that this one is in the top 3 in terms of the ride quality. I mean, it's up there with my 65 Bonneville, 66 Catalina, and some of the other Mercurys that I have, but it is just wonderful. So if you get a chance, I would highly suggest you think about owning one of these. The only thing I got to do is, these brakes are getting better. The car sat for so long, the rotors of course rusted. I probably should take them off and have them turn, but they're getting a lot better than they were when I first drove the car. So we'll see what happens after I drive it for another 50 miles. Boy, the idle quality in this car is great too. So smooth. Transmission shifts perfectly. C6s are pretty firm shifting transmissions. Some people like that, some don't. I don't mind it. It's just different from how the GMs and the 727s shifted, which were pretty smooth. In any case, hope you enjoyed this ride along. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for watching this video on the 74 Marquis. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also hit super thanks. And until next time, check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you. Thanks again for watching.